Hey everybody, welcome to the engine start episode of Classic Mini DIY's Bad Wolf Mini Builds. Today's the day, folks. Today we're going to try and start this motor. Alright, so the day has finally come where we're going to try and start up this motor for the first time and run it in with the cam and kind of dial things in a little bit. Now, there are a few things that I'm going to skip ahead. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on. I'm not going to show like an in-depth video of how to put the carbs in or the exhaust. I have done videos on that in the past. My clutch slave cylinder is set up already. I've already put that in. I'm kind of skipping a few things and focusing really on getting your distributor installed and starting up the motor for the first time and the things you need to take into consideration when you do that, as well as some of the common problems that you're just going to want to keep an eye out for so that if you see these things popping up, you aren't going to have, problems with your car, problems with your motor. So first things first, we need to fill up the car with oil, and most of the time, my recommendation, as well as most folks who are putting a motor together like this, is to use kind of a cheap, inexpensive oil to run it in the first time. Some other people will say use a break-in oil. That idea is a pretty contentious item on the internet. Personally, I just use kind of like the oil that I would normally use in the car on any given day. It's worked for me on the last 4 engine builds that I've done, so I'm going to stick to it. I'm happy with that method, but if you guys have a better method, or you'd like to share that better method, post it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear how you guys do this and how you guys break in a motor for the first time. Now, the oil that I'm using in this is the Valvoline VR1, and this is a 20W50 motor oil. And I like this because it has a high zinc content, which is going to help kind of set everything in, and it's a nice level of lubrication. One thing is that oil is relatively expensive. I got it on sale, but there are plenty of other oils you can use for this. In the past, I have used the Brad Penn or the Penn grade. Now they changed their name. It's the Penn grade oil. It's a 20W50 as well. And then there are tons of break-in oils, but those two have been really, really great for me for breaking in as well as daily operation. Now, before we go out there and get started on everything, I do want to tell you guys about 2 things. The first thing is that one of my product sponsors, so 7 Mini Parts is my primary sponsor, but I do work with Venom Steel. They make these black latex gloves that I use while I'm working on my car. I have partnered up with them for a giveaway, and that giveaway is going to give away 5 boxes of 500 gloves to 5 lucky people. And that giveaway is going to be running until the end of August, so you can find the link to that giveaway in the description below. I strongly recommend you go check those out. These gloves are crazy strong, and this is an international giveaway, so anybody in the world can win this. So for those of you who are a little farther away from Charlotte, don't worry, you can win a box of these as well. There's lots of different entry types. Some require you to subscribe to the channel, and then others are daily entries where you can visit some links and get some entries throughout the whole process. So if you're interested in winning those, head to that link in the description. The second thing I want to tell you guys about is a brand new t-shirt and poster that I am launching on my merch website. So it should be popping up on the side here. And what I'm calling this is the Classic Mini Project Illustrated. But you can pick up these t-shirts. I've got a few different mini colors available already. I'm working on more colors. Requests from you guys have been coming in. So I'm hoping to be able to offer you guys whatever color mini you want. Stripes, no stripes, black roof, white roof, whatever. Hopefully I'll have one that matches your mini or at least gets pretty close. So if you're interested in checking those out, you should see the link to my merch store on the bottom here. You can also find that in the description. And all the profits from these things go straight back into the channel for projects that are going to be coming up after the Bad Wolf mini build. So anyways, let's get out there, let's do some work. All right, so now looking at the motor here, I've got my valve cover on. I put a gasket on here, but I didn't put Permatex sealer on here like I normally do. That I'm going to put on a little later because I am going to get this powder coated, that black crinkle color. I think it's going to look really good. But I do want to try and start the motor now, so I've got this tightened down. My gasket right here, and the engine takes roughly 5 to 6 quarts of oil. When you have an oil cooler, it's going to be closer to 6, and keep in mind that if this is the first time you're starting up your car, you're definitely going to want to prime the oil cooler, and the way you can do that is by taking the hoses off and pouring the oil directly down into the hoses until that's full, and then you're also going to need to prime your oil pump. Now, there's 2 times you can do this. You can actually do this when you're putting the oil pump in, or you can do this at this time, like I'm doing, where I put a small funnel into this hole right here and poured oil down into that. And that is going to get that oil pump primed. You might need to turn the motor over a little bit by hand, not with the starter. So with your car in gear, spin the wheel and rotate the motor over to prime and get oil inside that oil pump. But now I'm going to fill this up, and this is going to be my opportunity to check for leaks as well. So I'm going to want to make sure that there's no oil leaking on the back of this valve cover, and then I'm going to check all the other points on the motor here, make sure that there's no oil dripping out the bottom of the motor. Pretty straightforward, so let's get to it. Alright, so this next step can be kind of confusing, but we're going to get through it. Basically what we're going to be doing is installing the distributor drive gear. It looks just like this, and the way that you mount this is by putting a bolt right inside here. It just screws in. I know that's not in focus, but you get the idea. And it goes right down in this hole here. Now you can't just set this in here willy-nilly. It's actually got a specific way that it needs to go in. Now, I have a picture up on the right side of the screen here, and hopefully this is going to give you a good idea. What happens is you actually put it in so that the line across it is perfectly horizontal. Now, the gears on this actual drive have a slight curve to them. So when you start to press it in, it is going to rotate, and once it's in, the line should be pointing roughly towards the first piston. Now, this needs to be installed when the motor is at top dead center at the time of its firing stroke. The way that you can tell that it's at its firing stroke and it's at the correct spot is that piston number 4 will have its inlet valve just opening and the exhaust valve closing. Now, this is going to be kind of hard to see if you have your valve cover on, so if you do have your valve cover on, you're going to want to take it off and double check this. But in my case, I actually had the motor at that position before I put it in the car here, so that it'd be a little bit easier for me here. Now, let's go ahead and put this drive gear in. This is going to be a little hard for me to show, but let's see if this works for you. So in my case, this is actually off by just a little bit. This top side over here needs to come down just a little bit over here. So I'm going to put my screw back in there. I'm going to do this again. All right, that's much better. So that is in the correct position based on the diagram that you probably should still see on the right side of the screen. And I know that that doesn't look much different than it did just a minute ago, but you'll just have to trust me here because it is in the right spot now. So the next step is to put the retaining ring thing that goes around this in here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that and I'll show you how that goes on. So now here's our ring. This sets down, you've got a hole right here, matches up with that hole, and it has an O-ring that goes around the outside of this thing here. Check that O-ring, make sure it's in good shape. If it isn't, you're going to want to get a replacement. And then you're just going to feed this down in there. Now, if you painted your motor, it's probably going to be a little tight. That's okay. Okay, so first things first, you'll see that I have my old distributor in here. And the reason I have my old distributor in here is simply because I've got the marks on my old retaining ring here as well as my old distributor. It's very messy, as you can see, but the goal here is to match this rotor up to the number 1 piston initially. So what that means is make this rotor point towards the number 1 piston. And then you're going to rotate the motor in its normal direction so you reach top dead center. And when you do that, once you've reached top dead center, you've reached the static timing point. And that's effectively the end of the compression stroke for the number 1 cylinder. So now the question is, why am I doing this? Well, for my car, I'm going to be putting a fancy 1-2-3 distributor in. So now that I have this in the correct position, which is about, once you've moved it to top dead center, it's about at the 2 o'clock position. Now I can take my old distributor out and put the 1-2-3 in. And we're going to put our new 1-2-3 in. So this has a ridge on the bottom. This ridge obviously just matches up with the drive gear we put in a moment ago. So we'll slide that in here. Oh. And it's a little tight because it's brand new, of course. So now, with this 1-2-3, the benefit of this is that it's fully electronic. And this little cover right here, or this cover, I can't remember, one of these covers, it comes off and you can actually adjust the advance curve on this, which is pretty dang cool. So really, at this point, all you gotta do is rotate this housing until the cables are coming out in a convenient way. It does mention that if you do have a vacuum advance on the 1-2-3, which mine doesn't because I don't have that on my car, but if you do, the vacuum advance would be pointing towards the 3rd cylinder. That's usually a good spot, but basically you just want to be able to, you know, put these wires onto the ignition coil in an easy, convenient way. All right, so now it's at this point that we need power. And what I've done here, I have connected the red power cable, the positive lead, to the positive lead of the ignition coil here. And now I've got to go connect up my battery. And I'm going to need my keys for my car, obviously, because I'm going to have to turn that ignition on. So hopefully my battery hasn't died and we can come out here and finish up this housing and get it tightened down. There's a little LED, green LED light that we got to check in here and make sure that that shows up. And then this should be ready to roll and we can try starting up the motor with the new ignition coil. Obviously we have to test the oil pressure on the motor as well before we do all that. But let's connect that battery up and give this a go. All right, so now that we have the 1-2-3 distributor tightened up and in place, I've also verified that I have oil pressure. I went ahead and put all of my spark plugs in, and then I went ahead and plugged up my ignition cables here, and I put them in their firing order, which is 1, 3, 4, 2. So you can see that these are actually numbered, and I start on the top here with the number 1 cylinder and move around the left side of my distributor cap in order to lay all of that out. So now what we're going to do is test the fueling system, and the way that I'm going to do that is I've already filled up my car with fuel, so I need to determine whether or not there are any leaks. Now on the back side of the car I didn't see any leaks, and I've went ahead and connected up all of my fueling system up here. We've got one hose coming up from the back of the car, and then our 2 new hoses and 1 pipe here made out of copper. So one thing you'll also see here is that I have a PCV valve attached kind of in a weird way. I don't have it connected to my breathers right now, which is fine. That's not the end of the world. The breathers are just going to vent to the atmosphere for the time being. But this is going to prevent a vacuum leak from happening, where I'm going to have my new fancy PCV valve connected to my intake manifold. Now, once I start this motor, I'm going to go through a couple steps. One, I'm going to test the fueling system. I'm going to test that it starts up, and then once it starts up, I am going to probably cut it off pretty immediately unless it's running pretty smoothly, which I am not super confident that it will be. But if it is running smoothly, or at least smooth enough, I'm going to bring it up to about 2,000 RPMs, and I'm going to run it for 20 minutes that way. Now the reason that I want to get this started up and running for that long, just kind of idling, is the fact that I put a new camshaft in here. And that camshaft and all the new lifters have to set in and really run in so that none of that stuff has any failures while I'm actually driving the motor. That 20 minutes will allow it to get up to temperature. That 20 minutes will allow it to run at a constant RPM so everything can heat up and wear evenly for the first, actual heat up of the motor. And then once that is done, then we will be able to, run this, drive it down the road and do more of the, road tests, things like that. But I also can't really do that until I bleed my brakes and do a few other things. But we won't get too far into that in this episode. Let's just turn on the ignition so that the fuel pump kicks on, and we're gonna watch to see if there's any leaks around the fueling system up here on the front. So right now I'm hearing fuel passing through this. Can hear the float bowl starting to fill up, which is great. That is exactly what we're hoping to hear. And as of this moment, I don't see any leaks just yet. Probably going to want to hold that down some way once I get this all done. So now I'm going to run to the back of the car, check that, make sure there's no leaks back there. Should be good though. Looks like I spoke too soon. There's a small leak in the back of the car there, so I'm going to get back there, tighten some stuff up, and then we'll come back and test this out again. All right, so that leak is going to take a little bit more time. It's actually around my sending unit, so I'm going to have to address that later. But for right now, I've got it cleaned up and it's not going to be leaking too bad back there. I can go ahead and spin this over and see what we get. Let's see if the sucker starts up. Yeah, all right. All right, so now that we verified that the motor does indeed start up, we need to run it now and run in all of the new metal components inside. Get things up to operating temperature. Keep an eye on the temperature because this is new fluid in here. We need to make sure that nothing is overheating and leaking or anything like that.
Tonight, I mustn't think of him. Music might go please. Tonight I must forget those precious hours.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. The motor started. The engine is running. Now, I didn't get a chance to run it in the full 20 minutes because the exhaust manifold started looking pretty hot. It was like getting red. So I went ahead and cut it off. I did some temperature readings and things were a little too hot for my liking. So I've got to kind of dial in the fuel mixture a little bit before I can continue to run it in. So for right now, it's sitting, it's cooling off. Additionally, I mentioned there is a fuel leak in the back I need to figure out. I think it's coming from the fuel sending unit, but more research is needed into that. But rest assured that when I do replace that fuel sending unit seal, if that's what I have to do, I will bring you guys along with me. However, the engine has started. I repeat, the engine has started, and I'm very excited. I hope you guys found this video educational. This one was a little hard for me to do because there was always something that I had to go look for and kind of tweak and address. If any of the stuff that I said didn't make sense, post a comment in the section below and I will try and answer the questions the best I can. Also, don't forget the giveaway is now live, and if you guys want to win a set of 500 of these gloves, 5 people are going to win a box of those, and you can enter into that contest in the link below. A big thank you to Venom Steel for providing the products in that giveaway. And of course, a huge thank you to 7 Mini Parts. This build and this engine assembly and everything really would not be possible without them. So thank you so much, 7 Mini. If you guys are in North America and you're looking for parts for your classic Mini, head over to 7ent.com. Their link is in the description below. They've got tons of awesome parts. And I have included a few of my favorite parts from this episode in the description as well, specifically that 123 distributor. That thing was really easy to install and it pretty much just worked. I'm pretty stoked with that. I'm gonna have to tweak it a little bit and play with the advanced curves and see what that's all like, but that'll be later on down the road after I get this to more of a stable state. So, upcoming videos, brake bleeding, rod change, gear lever installation. That'll be coming here really soon. I've got lots of tuning I've got to do to this. I also have a full SU carburetor rebuild kit. I didn't do this beforehand because I kind of wanted to limit the amount of new things going on in the car at the time. And I obviously didn't really use my own judgment on that, and I put the 123 distributor right in. That ended up panning out. But I'm going to show you guys how to rebuild your SU carburetors here in the near future. And there is lots more. So stay tuned for more episodes, and we'll get this car back on the road. But until next time, enjoy those minis and motor on.